The space station called Horizon's Edge floated in the darkness between stars. It was old and large, built by species that had traveled the galaxy long before humans ever looked up at the night sky and wondered what was out there. Now it served as a meeting place, a market, a home for traders and travelers from 100 different worlds. Park pressed her hand against the cold glass of the observation window and watched the ships come and go. Small shuttles carried cargo to the docking rings. Larger vessels waited in the distance, too big to dock directly with the station. Beyond them all, a dying red star filled half the sky with its dim and ancient light. Was 28 years old. She had black hair that she kept tied back in a simple knot, and her hands were rough from years of hard work. She was not tall or particularly strong by human standards. She was just a maintenance technician on a small trading ship called the Steady Horizon, one of the first Korean vessels allowed to trade independently in this part of space. Humans were still new to the galaxy. Only 50 years had passed since the first alien ships appeared in Earth's orbit. Only 30 years since humanity was granted basic trading rights. To most of the species on stations like this one, humans were a curiosity at best. Many saw them as primitives who had barely learned to leave their own planet. Some saw them as something even less than that. The door behind slid open with a soft hiss. She did not need to turn around to know who it was. The footsteps were familiar. Walked up beside her and looked out at the same view. He was in his early 40s, with gray starting to show in his hair. He served as the navigator on the Steady Horizon, but he also handled most of the talking when they dealt with other species. He had a gift for staying calm when others would lose their temper. "You heard about the?" he asked. Nodded slowly. "I saw their ship dock this morning. Station security sent out a message. They are recommending that humans stay in the lower sectors while the delegation is here." Finally turned to look at him, recommending. Strongly recommending. His face was carefully neutral, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. "You know how they are." Yes, knew. Everyone knew about the. They came from a world with gravity nearly twice as strong as Earth. This had made them tall and powerful, with long limbs and thick muscles. Their faces looked something like a wolf mixed with an insect, with large eyes designed to see in dim light and jaws that could crush bone. They had conquered 6 other species before anyone convinced them to join the Galactic Conquered and stop making war. But even now, centuries later, they still believed that the galaxy belonged to the strong. They looked at smaller species the way a lion looks at rabbits. They did not see people. They saw prey. "I need to go to the upper market," said. "The coils for the engine cooling system are ready for pickup. If I do not get them today, we will be stuck here for another week waiting for the next shipment." Frowned. "The upper market is on Platform 9. That is where they have been spending most of their time." "I know." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I am not telling you what to do, but if you go up there, please be careful. Do not make eye contact with them. They see it as a challenge. If they speak to you, keep your head down and say nothing. Just walk away." Looked at him for a long moment. She thought about her grandmother, who had lived through wars and occupation, and had never once lowered her head to anyone. She thought about the in Ulsan, where she had spent her childhood learning techniques that were older than most nations on Earth. "I will be careful," she said. This was not quite a promise, but seemed to accept it. He nodded and stepped back from the window. "I will have the cargo hold ready when you return. We should be able to leave by tomorrow if everything goes well." Grabbed her jacket from the hook by the door. It was old leather, worn soft by years of use, and it had belonged to her mother before her. She pulled it on and checked that she had her identification chip and her credit chip in the inside pocket. The corridors of Horizon's Edge were busy at this hour. Walked past merchants selling food from worlds she had never seen, past engineers arguing in languages her translator could barely process, past children of species she could not name playing games she did not understand. The galaxy was vast and strange and often beautiful, and she had never stopped being amazed by it. But she had also never stopped noticing how other species looked at her, the quick glances, the way conversations would pause when she walked by, the subtle movements as people shifted away from her, not out of fear but out of something worse, dismissal. She was human, and humans were small and weak and new, and therefore humans did not matter. The lift to Platform 9 was crowded, squeezed inside and pressed herself against the wall. A tall being with blue skin and 4 arms stood next to her, taking up most of the space. It did not acknowledge her existence. When the doors opened on Platform 9, felt the change immediately. The air was different here. There was tension in the crowd, a nervous energy that made people move faster and speak more quietly than they should. And then she saw why. 3 stood in the middle of the main walkway. They were not doing anything, just standing there, watching the other species move around them. But that was enough. The crowd flowed around them like water flowing around rocks in a river. No one came within 5 meters of them if they could help it. The largest of the 3 was enormous, nearly 3 meters tall, with ritual scars carved into his hard outer shell. His eyes moved slowly across the crowd and could see the contempt in them. He was a predator surrounded by prey, and he wanted everyone to know it. Lowered her gaze and joined the flow of the crowd. She had work to do. She was not here to make trouble. But as she walked toward the parts dealer on the far side of the platform, she could not stop the thought that rose unbidden in her mind. Someday, she thought, someday humans would not have to lower their eyes. She did not know that someday was coming much sooner than she expected. The upper market of Platform 9 was a maze of stalls and shops that stretched across an area larger than a football field. Merchants from dozens of worlds had set up their businesses here, selling everything from engine parts to exotic foods to technology that humans had not yet learned to understand. The ceiling was high above, made of transparent material that let in the red light of the dying star outside. It gave everything a strange, bloody glow. Moved through the crowd with practiced ease. She was small, and in a place like this, small was an advantage. She could slip through gaps that larger beings could not fit through. She could move quickly without pushing anyone or drawing attention to herself. The parts dealer was a species that looked something like a giant ant standing on 2 legs. He had 4 arms and large compound eyes that seemed to see everything at once. His name was too complicated for human mouths to pronounce, so most of his customers just called him Keys. Ah, the human! Keys clicked his mandibles together in what passed for a smile among his people. You are punctual. I like punctual. Many customers say they will come and then they do not come. Very annoying, very bad for business. I always keep my promises, said. Do you have the coils? Yes, yes. 2 cooling coils, heavy duty, compatible with Earth standard engines. He reached under his counter with 2 of his arms and produced a metal case. Good quality, will last many years if you treat them properly. Opened the case and checked the contents. The coils were exactly what she had ordered. They were heavy, about 20 kilograms each, but she had carried heavier things before. Her family had been fishers for generations before the aliens came. She had grown up hauling nets full of fish onto boats in rough seas. A pair of engine coils was nothing. She transferred the payment to Keys and lifted the case by its handle. Thank you. Maybe I will see you again next time we pass through. Always welcome. Tell your friends about Keys. Best prices on the station. Smiled and turned to leave. The walk back to the lift would take about 10 minutes if the crowd was not too thick. She could be back on the steady horizon within the hour, and then could start installing the new coils. Everything was going according to plan. She was halfway across the platform when the crowd in front of her began to move strangely. At first she did not understand what was happening. People were pushing to the sides, pressing against the stalls and each other, trying to get out of the way of something. Then she heard the heavy footsteps, and she knew. The 3 were walking through the market. They moved slowly, deliberately, taking their time. They did not need to rush. The crowd parted before them like grass bending before the wind. Every species on the platform, no matter how large or how proud, stepped aside when they came near. Moved to her left, pressing against the front of a food stall. She kept her eyes on the ground and held her case of coils against her chest. Just let them pass, she told herself. Just let them pass and everything will be fine. They came closer. She could hear them making sounds to each other, their voices deep and harsh. Her translator rendered the words, but she did not really listen. She did not want to hear what they were saying about the lesser creatures around them. And then she heard something else. A voice, small and scared, speaking in Korean. I am sorry, please. I did not mean to. Looked up. A young woman stood in the path of the. She was human, Korean-like, probably no more than 19 or 20 years old. She wore the uniform of a junior clerk, the kind of job that new crew members took when they first came to space. Her arms were full of data tablets, and her eyes were wide with fear. She had not moved fast enough. The lead, the huge one with the scars, did not slow down. He did not go around her. He simply raised one massive clawed hand and pushed her aside like she was a piece of trash in his way. The girl flew backward and hit the deck hard. The tablets scattered across the floor, some of them cracking from the impact. A cry of pain escaped her lips as she landed on her arm. They made a sound. The translator said it was laughter. Weak things should learn their place, he said. His voice was loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. This is what happens to prey that forgets what it is. His two companions made sounds of agreement. They looked down at the girl on the floor with expressions of pure contempt. No one moved to help her. The crowd stood frozen, watching, too afraid to draw attention to themselves. Station security was nowhere to be seen. Even if they had been there, knew they would probably do nothing. The Galactic Concord had rules about non-interference. They would receive a formal complaint at worst. The girl would receive nothing but bruises. Looked at the young woman on the floor. She was cradling her arm and trying not to cry. She looked so small, so helpless. Thought about her grandmother again. The old woman had lived through things that most people today could not imagine. She had survived when survival seemed impossible, and she had taught many things, not just techniques but also principles. One of those principles was simple. You do not stand by while the strong hurt the weak. Not ever. Not for any reason. Set down the case of coils. They had already started walking again, moving on to wherever they were going. They had already forgotten about the human girl. She was nothing to them, less than nothing. Hey! The word was not loud, but it cut through the noise of the market like a knife. Everyone nearby fell silent. The lead stopped. His head turned, rotating on his neck in a way that would be impossible for a human. His eyes searched for the source of the sound. They found. She stood in the middle of the walkway, her feet planted, her hands at her sides. Her face was calm, almost blank, but there was something in her eyes that made the people near her step back even further. You knocked her down, said. Her voice was steady and clear. Help her up. The silence that followed was so complete that she could hear her own heartbeat. They turned to face her fully. All 3 meters of him. All 200 kilograms of predatory muscle and bone. He looked at this small human woman who barely reached his chest, and his translator rendered his response as a sound that was equal parts amusement and threat. You speak to me, small thing, he said. You bare your teeth at a hunter of the 3rd circle. Did not move, she did not blink. I will not ask again, she said. The market had gone completely still. Every being on Platform 9 had stopped what they were doing to watch what was happening. Merchants froze behind their stalls. Customers stood with purchases half completed in their hands. Even the children had stopped playing. Everyone could feel that something important was about to happen. The Called stared down at the human woman before him. In his entire life, He had never experienced anything quite like this moment. He had killed 17 opponents in sanctioned combat. He had hunted creatures on a dozen worlds. He had made warriors twice his age back down with nothing but a look. And now this tiny creature, this human, was telling him what to do. His two companions moved to flank positions on either side of. It was instinct, the behavior of pack hunters who had evolved to surround their prey before the kill. They did not even think about it. Their bodies simply knew what to do. "You are either very brave or very stupid," said. "I have not decided which. Perhaps I will find out when I break your bones." Said nothing. She just watched him with those calm, dark eyes. Felt something stir in his chest. It was unfamiliar and he did not like it. Later, he would realize that it was the first hint of doubt he had felt in many years, but in that moment he pushed the feeling away. This was a human. Humans were small and soft and weak. They had no claws, no fangs, no natural weapons of any kind. They were prey animals who had somehow learned to build ships and travel between stars. He would show this one her place. Moved. He was fast. That was something few species understood about the. Despite their size, they could move with shocking speed when they wanted to. His arms swept toward in a wide arc, the same casual backhand strike he had used on the girl earlier. It was not meant to kill, just to break a few ribs and teach a lesson. But was not there. She had seen the attack coming before it started. Her grandmother had taught her to read bodies, to watch for the small movements that came before the big ones. The tensing of a muscle, the shifting of weight, the slight turn of a shoulder. By the time's arm began to move, already knew where it would go. She stepped to the side, a small movement that put her just inside his reach. His arm passed over her head, close enough to ruffle her hair. And then she was beside him, her hands reaching for his extended arm. What happened next took less than 2 seconds. Grabbed his wrist with one hand and his elbow with the other. She turned her body, dropping her weight low, and stepped behind his front leg. Her hip pressed against his thigh. And then she threw him. The technique was called nage in some schools, ippon nage in others. His grandmother had called it the sweeping hip throw. The name did not matter. What mattered was the principle behind it. You did not need to be stronger than your opponent. You just needed to use their strength against them. Weighed nearly 4 times as much as, but in that moment his weight worked against him. His own momentum, combined with the precise angle of his body and the leverage of her hips, lifted him off the ground. For one impossible moment, the hunter was flying through the air. He cleared the safety railing at the edge of the platform. His clawed hands grabbed at nothing. A sound came from his throat that might have been surprise or fear or both. And then he was falling, tumbling down through the open space between the platform levels. Emergency gravity nets caught him 3 floors below. He hit them hard and lay there, stunned, staring up at the ceiling with eyes that could not quite believe what had just happened. On platform 9, the silence was absolute. Straightened up slowly. She was breathing a little harder than usual, but her face was still calm. She turned to look at the 2 remaining. They stared at her. Their expressions were almost impossible to read for most species, but could see it clearly. They were confused. They were uncertain. They were, for perhaps the first time in their lives, afraid of something smaller than themselves. "Your friend will live," said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried through the silent market. "The gravity nets are designed to catch falling cargo. They can easily handle his weight." The 2 said nothing. They seemed frozen, unable to process what they had witnessed. Took a step toward them. They flinched. Actual hunters flinched at the movement of a human woman. "Now," said, "would you like to help her up?" She pointed at the young clerk, who was still on the floor, staring at with an expression of pure shock. They moved immediately. They walked to the girl and helped her to her feet with exaggerated care, as if she were made of glass that might break at any moment. One of them even gathered her fallen tablets and handed them back to her. "Thank you," the girl whispered. She was trembling. Nodded and turned away. She walked back to where she had left her case of coils, picked it up, and headed for the lift. The crowd parted before her, but not the way they parted for the. This was different. This was something closer to respect. Behind her, she could hear voices beginning to rise. People were talking, pointing, trying to understand what they had seen. Devices were being checked. The moment had been recorded from dozens of angles. By the time reached the lift, the video was already spreading through the station's network. By the time she reached the steady horizon, it had reached the broader galactic information streams. By the end of the week, every major species in the known galaxy would see what happened on Platform 9. They would watch a 58-kilogram human woman throw a 200-kilogram hunter off a platform with nothing but her bare hands. And nothing would ever be quite the same again. The message came 3 hours after return to the steady horizon. It was an official summons from the station administrator's office, delivered in 17 different languages and marked with the highest priority codes available. Read it twice before looking up at her. "They want you in the administrator's office, immediately." Was in the engine room helping to install the new cooling coils. Her hands were covered in grease and her hair had come loose from its knot. "I know," she said. "I saw the message." "What happened up there?" She told him. She kept her voice flat and simple, describing the events like she was reading from a report. When she finished, sat down heavily on a cargo crate and put his head in his hands. "You threw her off a platform," he said slowly. Off a platform." "He was going to hit me." "I believe you, he shook his head. "Do you understand what this means? They do not forget things like this. They do not forgive. They will demand punishment. They might demand your execution." Wiped her hands on a rag and began walking toward the door. "Then I should probably not keep the administrator waiting." The administrator's office was located in the central hub of the station, in a section that most traders never saw. The corridors here were wider and cleaner, decorated with art from 100 different worlds. Guards stood at every intersection, their weapons visible and ready. Was escorted by 2 station security officers who kept glancing at her like she might explode at any moment. She ignored them. Her mind was calm and clear, the same way it had been on the platform. Whatever was coming, she would face it. The administrator's office was large and round, with a curved window that looked out at the stars. Behind a desk that seemed too big for any single being sat administrator, a reptilian creature with scales the color of old bronze and eyes that missed nothing. But was not alone. Standing to one side was a thin human man in a formal suit. Recognized him from the briefing she had been required to attend when she first came to space. Commander Han, the senior human diplomatic officer in this sector. He was responsible for managing humanity's reputation among the other species. Right now, he looked like he had not slept in days. "Park said," his voice was deep and rough like stones grinding together. "Please sit." There was only one chair designed for humans in the room. Sat. "I have watched the recording of your incident 17 times, continued. "I have had it analyzed by experts in biomechanics from 12 different species. None of them can fully explain what they saw." Said nothing, she waited. "The delegation has filed a formal complaint. They are demanding your immediate arrest for assault on a protected member of their expedition. They want you imprisoned and handed over to their custody for traditional justice." Commander stepped forward. "However, we have examined the legal status of the individual in question. He was not a diplomatic envoy. He was a private bodyguard employed by a trading company. The diplomatic immunity claim does not apply." "Nevertheless," said, "they are powerful. They have many allies. If they choose to make this a political issue, it could have serious consequences for human trading rights in this sector. Perhaps in the entire galaxy." Felt the weight of those words settle on her shoulders. She had known, in the moment when she stepped forward on that platform, that there might be consequences. She had not cared. She still did not care. But she understood now that her actions might affect more than just herself. "What would you have me do?" she asked. Before could answer, the door to his office slid open. I entered. She was female, smaller than the males but still towering over every human in the room. Her carapace was smooth and unmarked by the ritual scars of a hunter. Instead, strange symbols had been painted on her shoulders in a deep blue color. "I am," she announced. Her voice was different from the male had encountered, lighter and more controlled. "I speak for the Dominion in matters of honor and law." Rose from his chair, a sign of respect that had never seen him show before. "We did not expect you so soon." The situation required immediate attention, turned her large eyes toward. "You are the human who defeated." "I am." Studied her for a long moment. Felt like she was being examined under a microscope, every detail of her body and posture being recorded and analyzed. "Was a ranked hunter of the third circle," said. "He had 17 confirmed kills in sanctioned combat. He was considered one of the finest warriors of his generation. And you," she paused, "you weigh perhaps 60 kilograms. You have no claws, no fangs, no natural armor. You used no weapons. You showed no fear." She took a step closer, too. The humans in the room tensed but remained still. "How did you do this thing?" Thought about her answer carefully. "On my world there is a saying, a river defeats the rock not through strength but through persistence. The water is soft and the rock is hard, but over time, the water wears the rock away." She paused. "My grandmother's grandmother learned the techniques I used. She taught my grandmother, who taught my mother, who taught me. We have been perfecting the art of defeating larger opponents for 3,000 years." Was silent for a long time. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Then she made a sound that's translator could not quite interpret. It might have been surprise. It might have been admiration. "Among my people," said slowly, "when a lesser creature defeats a greater one through superior skill, we do not call it assault. We call it approving. It is one of the highest honors a warrior can achieve." She turned to face Administrator. "The Dominion formally withdraws all complaints against the human called Park. Furthermore, we extend recognition to her as a warrior of merit, with all the rights and privileges that status provides." His mouth opened and closed several times before he could speak. "I see, that is most unexpected." Turned back to. For just a moment, something passed between them. A recognition, perhaps, an understanding between two beings who knew what it meant to be underestimated. "Your grandmother taught you well," said. "Perhaps one day you will teach others." Then she left, as quickly as she had come. In the silence that followed, Commander made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "Well," he said, "that is certainly one way to establish diplomatic relations." Just nodded. She was already thinking about the future. The steady horizon departed from Horizon's Edge 3 days after the incident on Platform 9. Its cargo holds were full. Its engine was running smoothly with the new cooling coils, and its crew had become the most famous humans in the sector without ever intending to. Stood on the observation deck as the station grew smaller behind them. The dying red star still filled half the sky, but it seemed less threatening now, less lonely, just another star in a galaxy full of them. Joined her as he always did. He carried 2 cups of tea, real tea from Earth that he guarded more carefully than any cargo. He handed one to her without speaking. They drank in silence for a while, watching the stars. "The video has been viewed over 2 billion times, finally said. "That is just the official count. The real number is probably much higher." Nodded. She had seen some of the reactions. Humans across the galaxy were sharing the video with comments of celebration and pride. Other species were analyzing it, debating it, trying to understand how such a thing was possible. "They have released a statement," continued. They have declared you a recognized warrior. Other members of their species are now forbidden from challenging you without formal approval from their council. It is apparently a very great honor." "I did not want honor," said quietly. "I just wanted them to help that girl up." "I know," smiled, the first real smile she had seen from him since before the incident. "That is why it matters so much." They fell silent again. The station was now just a small dot of light among millions of others. "Things are going to change," said. "You understand that, yes? This is not just about you anymore. This is about all of us, every human in space." "I know. The predator species are already talking. They were the most feared hunters in the galaxy. If a human can defeat one of their best warriors with bare hands, then humans are not prey. Humans are something else entirely." Thought about what it said. Perhaps one day you will teach others. At the time she had not understood what the meant. Now she was beginning to. "My grandmother used to tell me a story," said, "about the early days of our people. We were not the strongest animals on Earth. We were not the fastest. Our claws were small, our teeth were weak, our skin was soft. The predators looked at us and saw easy meals." She took a sip of her tea. "But we survived, we more than survived. Do you know how?" Shook his head. "We were clever," said, "and we were stubborn, and we never stopped learning. When a predator was too fast for us to outrun, we learned to use weapons. When a predator was too strong for us to fight, we learned to set traps. When a predator was too dangerous to face alone, we learned to work together." She turned to face him. "And when we faced an enemy who was bigger and stronger and more powerful than us, we learned to use their own strength against them. That is what my grandmother taught me. That is what her grandmother taught her. We have been fighting things larger than ourselves since before we had words to describe what we were doing." Was quiet for a moment. "And now we bring that knowledge to the stars." "Yes." Looked out at the galaxy spread before them. Billions of stars, billions of worlds, billions of species. Some of them ancient and powerful beyond human understanding. Some of them looking at humanity right now and wondering what they really were. "They thought they knew us," she said. "They saw our size, they saw our soft skin and our small claws and our short teeth. They looked at us and they saw prey." She finished her tea and set the cup aside. "They were wrong." Far behind them, on the station orbiting the dying star, a young clerk named was telling her about the day a small woman threw a hunter off a platform. She told the story with wide eyes and waving hands, still barely able to believe what she had seen. Her listened with growing amazement. When she finished, one of them asked if she had gotten the woman's name. Park said, "Her name is Park." They looked up the video and watched it together. Then they watched it again. By the end of the night, every human on that ship had seen it at least 10 times. The story spread. It moved from ship to ship, from station to station, from world to world. Humans told it to each other with pride in their voices. Other species told it with something else in theirs. Wonder, perhaps, or caution, or the beginning of something that might have been respect. Within a month, the phrase, "Remember Park," had become a rallying cry for humans who faced discrimination in alien spaces. Within a year, training centers teaching traditional Korean martial arts had opened on 6 different stations. Within a decade, they themselves would begin sending students to learn from human masters. But all of that was still to come. For now, there was just a small ship called the Steady Horizon, flying through the darkness between stars, and on its observation deck, there was a woman named Park, drinking tea and watching the galaxy go by. She did not know what the future held. None of them did, but she knew one thing for certain. The galaxy had looked at humanity and seen prey. They had pushed her aside, as they had pushed aside so many others before her, and she had picked them up and thrown them off the platform. Now the galaxy was watching, and humanity was just getting started. The red light of the dying star faded behind them. Ahead, new stars were waiting, new worlds, new challenges. smiled and went back to work. There was always more work to do.